My wife is divorcing me. Well, she's trying to pull a fast one on me. She thinks she's going to get a lot of money, but there's something I haven't told her yet. Let me share it with you. It's funny how people can use and hurt you, but when you stand up for yourself, suddenly you're the bad guy. I'm a 53-year-old man, and this is about my second wife. Her name is Kayla, and we've been together for over 5 years. I lost my first wife in a car accident 13 years ago, when my daughter was 12. After that, I stayed single for a long time. Then, 4 years ago, I met Kayla at a bar. That same year, my daughter turned 19 and left for college in Pasadena. It was a very lonely time for me, and I started going to the bar after work almost every day. Losing my first wife was incredibly hard, but I had to be strong for my daughter. We leaned on each other. But when she left for college, my life felt empty. I started drinking more, staying at the bar late to pass the time. Kayla worked there as a bartender, and since I was there every night, she and the staff got to know me. After about a week, she came up to me and asked if I was okay. That's how we started talking, and eventually, we began dating. Kayla is much younger than me, 10 years to be exact, so I wasn't sure if I wanted to get serious. But she made the first move and asked me out. It helped me deal with my loneliness, though I never thought we'd have a long-term relationship because of the age gap. But Kayla was very mature for her age. She's a single mom with a 3-year-old son, raising him on her own after her boyfriend left her when she was pregnant. We bonded over our tough experiences. When things started getting serious, I told my daughter about Kayla, and she supported me. She knew how lonely I had been. When my daughter moved away, she wanted what was best for me. After dating Kayla for a year, we decided to get married in a small ceremony. Kayla didn't have much family except for her son and sister. They were both abandoned by their parents when they were little and grew up in an orphanage until they could make a life for themselves. Looking back, I realized that loneliness can make you vulnerable, and that's what happened to me. I was in a very vulnerable place and didn't think too much, just went along with falling for Kayla. The first year of our marriage was great. We were happy, in love, and went on trips and to parties. Her little son was always running around the house, and it reminded me of when my daughter was that age. I loved him like he was my own. Kayla left her job after a while because she wanted to focus on her son, who she felt she had neglected while building her career. I didn't mind since I was earning enough to support us. I have a real estate business, which I took over from my father after he retired. Everything was going well until my daughter came to visit me during Christmas. She warned me to be careful about spending too much money on Kayla. Until then, I thought I was just taking care of her needs and making her happy, just like I did with my first wife. But my first wife was simple and didn't care much for expensive things, while Kayla loved fashion and had a taste for designer clothes and accessories. My daughter must have noticed something I didn't, looking at it from an outside perspective. In a relationship, you shouldn't lose yourself or end up just following your partner's lead. In my case, I felt like Kayla was much younger and more beautiful than me, so I spoiled her. That's where I went wrong. After my daughter's warning, I started to be more cautious with money, which didn't sit well with Kayla. She figured out that my daughter had influenced me. Not long after we got married, Kayla quit her job and asked if we could have a joint bank account. She said she didn't want to ask me for money every time she needed something. But I wasn't comfortable with the idea of giving her full access to my accounts, so a joint account seemed like a fair compromise. I was the only one putting money into the joint account since Kayla wasn't earning. We both had access to it, but I was the one filling it up and she was the one spending it. When my daughter warned me, I started putting less money in the account. Before, it was like a refill station. I'd deposit money, and she'd empty it. In the beginning, Kayla was grateful for everything I did. I even moved her son from a public school to a top private school, the same one my daughter attended. She was really thankful back then, and whenever I took her out to nice places, she appreciated it. But after we got married, her attitude changed. She started acting like she deserved everything, as if she had earned it herself. This began to bother me, especially after our second anniversary. Her expectations kept growing, and she wanted everything right away. That's when I started pulling back. I told her she was spending way too much and needed to cut back. She didn't take it well and started becoming distant. I'd come home from work, and she'd be out partying with friends, leaving her 6-year-old son at home or with her sister. I ended up spending more time with her son than with her. I was at a point in my life where I didn't want any drama, so I let her do what she wanted, but I stopped putting so much money into the account. This made her angry. She didn't need anything except money, so when I reduced how much I deposited, she started asking for it directly. It was hard for me to say no to her face, so I gave her money a few times, but when the demands got too much, I stopped. That's when she became really upset. She said I was pushing her to do something she didn't want to do. When I asked her what she meant, she just said I would find out soon enough. I kept being careful with money, and one day, Kayla angrily said to me, "Let me make this clear, you're not doing me a favor by supporting me. You don't deserve a young, beautiful wife like me, but here I am, so you should be happy and let me do what I want." After saying that, she stormed out of the house and didn't come home that night. I didn't bother to check on her, and when she returned the next day, we both acted distant, keeping our space from each other. While we were still going through this rough patch, one day I came home early and found her in bed with another man. It was someone she had known from the orphanage where she grew up. When I walked in, it was like she wasn't even trying to hide it. The man walked out of my bedroom, buttoning his shirt, looking nervous, but before I could even process what was happening, he was gone. It all happened so fast that I didn't have time to react, and by the time it sank in, he had already left. I'm not someone who gets violent or overreacts in the heat of the moment. Looking back, part of me had always sensed something like this might happen, so when I saw him coming out of my bedroom, I wasn't even surprised. I walked into the room and saw her getting dressed. I didn't yell or raise my voice. I just asked her calmly if she was cheating on me, and she admitted it. I could tell she was trying to provoke me, to get a reaction, but I didn't fall for it. Instead, I calmly asked her to leave. She didn't seem shocked or upset. She didn't argue. It was like she was already expecting this or had planned for it. She started packing her things, and that's when I realized her son wasn't home. I didn't even ask her where he was. She took some of her belongings and left the house. A week later, while I was at home, she came back. I saw her but didn't say anything, just ignored her. She handed me divorce papers and told me that I was suffocating and controlling, and that she needed her freedom. The divorce papers did catch me by surprise. Usually, when someone like her, who had been living off my money, wants a divorce, it means they're planning something big. I had a feeling she was after a lot of money, so I flipped straight to the part about alimony. Sure enough, she was demanding $500,000 from my parents' trust fund. You see, I come from a wealthy family, and my parents had put a few $1,000,000 in a trust for me. Being their only child, Kayla assumed I had access to all that money. That's when I realized her true motive. A few months ago, I was having a conversation with the trust committee about something, and Kayla overheard it. She casually asked me about the trust fund, and I didn't hide anything. I explained it to her, thinking nothing of it since this was early in our marriage. Fast forward to now, when she demanded $500,000 from the trust as part of the divorce. I couldn't help but laugh right in her face. It was obvious she didn't know anything about how the trust worked. I laughed hard, telling her how funny she was for thinking she could get her hands on that money. But instead of backing down, she bit her lip and coldly said she'd do whatever it took to get that money because, in her mind, it already belonged to her. Yeah, that was 5 days ago. I spoke to my lawyer today, and he gave me some things to think about before making any big decisions. One of the points he raised was about Kayla's son. As much as I can't stand her, I don't want her son to suffer because of all this. I'm considering taking responsibility for his education, even though he's not my biological child. I have no issues with him, and I've always cared for him. But I'm still thinking things through, and I'll decide once I get a clearer picture of how the divorce is going to play out. The last few months have been a whirlwind. I've been trying to let everything settle before making any moves. I haven't signed the divorce papers yet, and Kayla seems to think she's in a good position. She believes I'm dragging my feet because I want her back, but she's completely wrong. What she doesn't know is that the trust fund isn't mine to give, it belongs to my daughter. My parents willed the entire fund to her, and I agreed to that a long time ago. I'm making enough from my business to cover my expenses, but Kayla has no clue about any of this. Her lawyer recently approached us, suggesting we settle out of court. He argued that there was no need for a drawn-out legal battle if I would just agree to her demands and finalize the divorce. He even had the nerve to say that since I couldn't provide the lifestyle she deserves, it would be best to give her what's hers and let her move on. I had to laugh again. What exactly is hers? She's entitled to nothing. She deserves nothing. She's been living off my money and acting like it's hers. We didn't give in to their demands and instead decided to take this to court. I didn't bother to burst Kayla's bubble about the trust fund belonging to my daughter. Let her live in her delusions a bit longer. Meanwhile, she's been trying her hardest to make me jealous. Every day she's posting pictures with her new boyfriend, fancy restaurants, spa days, vacations, you name it. It's clear she's using the money from our joint account to fund her little adventures with this guy. But here's the thing, none of this bothers me. It's almost laughable. She's trying so hard to make me react, but I'm not playing her game. All I care about now is protecting my daughter's inheritance and making sure Kayla doesn't get a dime more than what she's legally owed. It's only a matter of time before she realizes she's been living in a fantasy. I had been putting money into the joint account mainly for her son's education, but Kayla chose to spend it on her temporary, flashy lifestyle instead. By the time she had burned through most of it, there wasn't much left, so I let her use it all up. There was no point in closing the account early because half of the money would have gone to her anyway, given the situation. I didn't want to tip her off about my next move, so I stayed quiet and let things play out. When the money was gone, Kayla expected the account to be refilled at the start of the month like usual, but I didn't do it. I let her wait. She messaged me, demanding that I deposit money for her son's school fees and other household expenses, but I ignored her. That's when she turned abusive. She sent angry messages, saying she would make me pay for every penny I was withholding. After her ranting, I went to the bank and closed the joint account due to our ongoing divorce. As soon as she got the notification that the account was closed, she went into a rage, bombarding my phone with abusive messages and voicemails. I saved every single one of them, knowing they could be useful later. I also kept some of her vacation photos with her boyfriend, where she was flaunting herself in a bikini. On the day of our first court hearing, she had the nerve to show up with her drug-addicted boyfriend. I'll get to that in a minute, but when I saw her outside the courthouse, she was all dressed up in expensive clothes, acting like she was just inches away from winning it all. She smirked at me, thinking she was about to take everything I had. Seeing her like that, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her son. She was ruining his life, and people like her shouldn't even have the responsibility of raising a child. They create broken, hollow individuals. When the court session began, my lawyer laid out our case, and the color drained from her face. Her reaction was priceless when my attorney revealed that the trust fund she was after had been willed to my daughter, not to me, and she had no legal claim to it. She quickly pulled her lawyer aside, and they came back with a new set of demands. This time, they asked for my house and a share of my business. To their dismay, both the house and the business also belonged to the trust, which was in my daughter's name. After my first wife passed away, my parents had wisely transferred the ownership of the house and business into the trust, knowing that something like this could happen. My father had warned me that I might be vulnerable and attract women who would try to take advantage of me for money. He was right, and their foresight ended up protecting everything I held dear. Kayla's plan to take everything from me crumbled right before her eyes, and the court case took a sharp turn in my favor. She had no claim to the things she thought she was entitled to, and now, she was left with nothing but her delusions of grandeur. Looking back now, I can see that my parents' warning was spot on. At the time, when they told me I might fall for someone like Kayla, I laughed and said I was too smart to let that happen. Well, they were right. Sometimes people like Kayla, who seem loving and caring, are just pretending, only interested in your money. I don't blame anyone but myself for not seeing through her act. My vulnerability and loneliness made me blind to her true intentions. When she realized she couldn't get anything from me, she tried to demand child support. However, before my attorney even had a chance to defend me, the judge dismissed her request, telling her that new demands couldn't be made on the spot. The judge made it clear that the courtroom wasn't a shopping mall where she could just bargain as she pleased. The case was postponed, and we were given a new court date. 2 weeks later, we received the new set of demands from her. She wanted $10,000 a month in spousal support since she wasn't working, along with child support for her son. If she hadn't wasted the money from our joint account on vacations and flaunting it in my face, I might have considered helping with her son's education. But after seeing how she used the money, I was determined not to agree to any of her demands. My lawyer and I gathered everything we could to prepare for the next court hearing, determined to leave her with nothing. By the time we went back to court, almost a month later, Kayla showed up again, but this time her confidence and glow were dimmed. She knew her chance to take anything from me was slipping away. My lawyer dismantled her claims one by one. The child support demand was the easiest to reject, as the boy wasn't biologically mine. They tried to argue that, as a stepfather, I had some moral obligation, but we pointed out how Kayla had been using the money from our joint account on vacations instead of her son's education. I told the court the same thing, that I had no problem helping with the boy's education, but she was clearly misusing the funds for herself. As for her $10,000 a month request, my attorney presented the evidence of her extravagant vacations with her boyfriend, all funded by my money. We also provided the abusive messages and voicemails she sent when I stopped giving her money. We even filed a case of verbal abuse against her to show how she had manipulated and mistreated me throughout the marriage. It wasn't as easy as it sounds, and there were plenty of legal hurdles to overcome. But in the end, the court dismissed all of Kayla's ridiculous demands. The judge granted the divorce based on her verbal abuse, manipulation, and financial exploitation. She had no claim to my property, no right to child support, and no monthly allowance. The court asked us if we wanted to pursue any further legal actions, but for me, getting out of that toxic marriage was enough. Kayla's plan to take advantage of me had completely failed, and I was finally free from her grasp. Now, I can focus on rebuilding my life and making sure my daughter's future is secure, just like my parents had intended. I thought about suing Kayla for everything she put me through, but in the end, I decided not to. I knew she didn't have anything to pay in compensation anyway. My main goal was to make sure she didn't walk away with a single penny, and I succeeded in that. Winning a case like this, especially against a woman, isn't easy these days, but if you're honest, careful, and hire a good lawyer, it's possible. Now, I'm planning to visit my daughter and spend time away from all this chaos. I hope I can move on soon. This time, I'm not going to repeat the mistake I made with Kayla. I let my loneliness cloud my judgment, but now I'm focusing on ways to keep myself busy and distracted. Marriage is off the table for me forever. If anything else comes up, I'll update you, but otherwise, this is where it ends. Thanks for following my story, and remember, don't make decisions just because you're lonely or desperate to have someone by your side. Hey everyone, I've been lurking around here, and I figured I'd post an update since some new things have come to light. As I mentioned before, my divorce from Kayla is finalized. She was fed up with having to ask me for money and didn't like it when I started saying no, so she thought divorcing me and taking $500,000 from the trust fund was a better option. Well, the joke's on her, she didn't get a single dime. There's something I forgot to mention in my last update about her boyfriend. During the divorce proceedings, I found out that the guy she was fooling around with was actually the father of her son. He had abandoned her when she got pregnant, but once she started flaunting her lavish lifestyle on social media, he came crawling back to her. And of course, she took him back because he's the father of her child. That explains why he was so comfortable hanging out in my house, having fun with her. Turns out I was the other guy all along, while he was the real father of her child. Pretty ironic, huh? A couple of months later, after I got back from visiting my daughter in Pasadena, I found a letter from Kayla in my mailbox. I had blocked her on everything: phone, email, social media, so this was her only way to reach me. I'm guessing she might have come to my place while I was gone for 3 months and left the letter behind. In the letter, she apologized for everything she did to hurt me. She also asked me, on humanitarian grounds, to help provide for her son. Apparently, she wanted me to pay his school fees so he could continue his education. Funny how she suddenly remembered to care about her son's future after blowing through all the money she had. Not sure if I'll respond or do anything about it, but honestly, I'm not feeling too charitable after everything that's happened. She had her chance, and she threw it away. I'm just glad I got out of that mess. As I mentioned before, I had enrolled Kayla's son in an international school. He used to attend a community school, but I wanted to give him a better opportunity. After discussing it with my lawyer, he said that if I truly wanted to, I could pay the school fees directly to the school and avoid giving any money to Kayla. But he also advised me, on a personal level, to stay far away from her. He warned that she might continue to use her son as an excuse to get more money from me. And he was right. The school fees were just the beginning. There are always extra costs for things like field trips, projects, and other activities. Kayla would have found a way to use those reasons to squeeze more money from me. Even if she didn't, she wouldn't be able to afford those extras on her own, so paying just the fees wouldn't really help the boy. I felt bad for the child, but I realized there was no real solution that wouldn't leave me open to more manipulation. I'm thankful I didn't have a child with Kayla. That would have made things even worse, and I can only imagine how disastrous that situation would have been. Fortunately, I've been able to move on. In the last 3 months, living with my daughter has helped me a lot. I've started going to the gym regularly and have plans for solo trips to clear my mind and get a new perspective on life. Thank you for following my story, and I hope others can learn from my experience. It's important to keep your vulnerability in check and not let it cloud your judgment. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this whole situation. Some people have said I should have helped the child go to a better school, but many others argue that since he's not my son, it's not my responsibility. I agree that it's a tough environment for him, but it's not my job to fix it. What do you think? This whole situation has been a wild ride, and I can't help but be amazed at the audacity of some people. By the way, if you enjoy stories like this and want to stay involved, you can support me by dropping a comment, giving a like, and subscribing. I post daily, so I'll see you tomorrow. Remember, it's always cool to be kind.